My quote for today is short, but I'm going to do a little bit of an explanation afterwards, like a spontaneous ad lib uh, bit. So, anyway, this is called Silly or Sour. I would rather be silly than sour. Okay, we all know those people that sort of have a cloak on. Whether that cloak is I'm depressed, don't bug me, don't ask me to do stuff. I'm stressed, I'm overwhelmed, I might be bipolar, I might snap. That there are people that have shields on, and those shields are deflecting tools to keep people from asking more of them or challenging them in certain ways. And, people use anger in the same way, that they use anger like, don't bother me, don't ask me, I don't have time, I'm super important. I remember a spiritual teacher of mine used to say, bitching is bragging. And I love that because so often, people are like, oh my God, it's like I did this and then I did that. And it was just so hard and blah, blah, blah. It was such a difficult day. And what they're really looking for is somebody to say, oh my God, you did such an incredible thing. What a hard day. You're amazing. Like that's what they're actually looking for. So their bitching is actually a form of bragging about how much they accomplished in a day. But I like this quote today that I would rather be silly than sour, because I think that it's a process of growing up to recognize when you're in you're putting on these coats or these cloaks of habit, and do they really serve you? Do they actually keep people away from you? Do you want to keep people away from you? Do you want to keep pushing people away? Do you want to live a life where your satisfaction comes from hooking other people, rather than being authentic and genuine? I find when I feel hooked by people's behaviors, cloaks, it actually is exhausting. It's actually exhausting because you recognize fairly quickly if you're awake that no matter what you do, it's not going to get better. Like there's always going to be one more drama in some way, shape, and form. And that somehow they thrive on that sort of weird twist in the negativity that actually makes them important or gets them what they want. So today would be a great day to kind of notice if you're doing any of those. And an easy way to look at it is, have you been clinically depressed in the past? Do you still have that kind of cloak on, even though maybe you're not clinically depressed anymore? Do you have a mindset that says you're overweight when you've lost weight and you actually look awesome, but you still have this mindset that you can't see yourself as beautiful? I think the mind is sort of a tricky thing. And I think more often than not, if we allow our inner child out, which is the silly part of this statement, if we let ourselves just be silly and ridiculous, especially I find that women appreciate a man who's willing to have a sense of humor, especially about himself. In not in a negative way, but in a revealing sort of way. I love it when someone has a way of saying something to me that pulls me out of my illusions or stupor or behavior, and that their phrase comes across like, really, really, Suzanne, really, because that helps me not fall for that trap again. I'm like, oh yeah, I am kind of using that. Isn't that true? And I just want to remind everybody that you are not this body. You are not what you think. You are not what you feel. You are a soul inhabiting a body, and this body has its idiosyncrasies that you have to learn around and be challenged by. We all do. But your soul is bigger and vaster and is completely whole. So regardless of the damage that you have suffered in your life, because everyone has suffered damage to a greater or lesser degree, and no one's damage is more important than another's damage, but we can get so attached to it. Like we get attached to, I was abused, don't try and push me, or don't, and we put on these cloaks rather than being willing to embrace the fact that, okay, I had this terrible event, but do I want this event to be the label that everyone sees for the rest of my life? How do I drop that label? And the first thing is be silly. I think that the more we let our inner child out, I think that our inner child can be really healthy and healed and whole. I think that all of us came in born beautiful and whole and wonderful. And then life happened and circumstances happened and people tried to throw labels on us and define who we were. And it kind of shut us down and it made part of us collapse. And I always tease and say it's kind of like we put our inner child in the basement to protect him or her. And I don't think that was a mistake, but I think that as you get older and wiser and you have more tools and you have better communication skills, that you can let the child out a little bit and have more fun and do more fun things. I think that it's important for us to recognize where we're being sour, like where we're being a sourpuss, and why do we constantly have to complain, right? Instead of find another way to express it. I think for me personally, one of the great gifts that I had was two things. One, being a ballet dancer, and the motto of every studio and ballet school I was at was there are no excuses. So stories don't matter. Why you can't do something doesn't matter. Why you didn't succeed right there does not matter. There are no excuses. And so I learned early on that there's no point in making an excuse. There's none. You fucked up. You fucked up. Now you have to figure out how to not do that. Okay. But you have to take responsibility and just go on. So that's the first step that helped me. The second step that helped me was doing all the Vipassana meditation training, where you have to sit in silence for days and days at a time, sometimes 10 days, sometimes a month, and simply notice your breathing and notice your awareness. And you start trying to move energy through your body in certain ways, and recognizing that you've got these blocks in your body. And as you try to penetrate that block, the emotion comes up, and the whole point is to observe the emotion. And it takes a type of spiritual, emotional, mental maturity to be able to observe something that is stuck in your body that's obviously dysfunctional or hidden or a wound, and not react, not knee-jerk react. I remember being in a Vipassana training, and there were a whole bunch of young people, and they came to a Vipassana training because it was the cheapest meditation thing that they could do, because Vipassana is oftentimes on donation. And so these people came, and by the third day they blew out because they had all this rage coming up, and they had never dealt with rage. And the moment they sat still and had to sit and wait, they suddenly had all this negative emotion that they didn't even want to look at, they didn't even want to deal with, and they just blew out of the space. And once they blew out, all of us breathed a sigh of relief, because their dysfunction was so discordant with the peacefulness that we were all attempting to find. And but I understood where they were coming from. I had anger coming up. It wasn't like I didn't have anger coming up, but I went and observed it, and was like, oh, that happened when I was 13. That person yelled at me, and their anger is in my body, and now this situation is lodged in my body, and now I've got anger at that person, but I've also got their anger at me, and I've taken on this person's anger, and it's hard to sort out those things, because in life people say things that we get slimed by a negative thought virus. And sometimes if we have any shred of doubt on the inside, that thing goes inside. And it's never good when it does that, because then it takes a while to kind of figure out how to extract it, and what's yours and what's your part in it, and what's theirs, and how to move theirs out and take responsibility for your part. So I think one of the greatest tools for healing in my life has always been to remember that my inner child is whole and healed and wonderful and beautiful and fabulous and conscious and aware and connected and intuitive and perceptive and artistic. And, I need to let her out. Like, she needs to have some air. She needs a chance to kind of be who she really is. And when I let her out, my sourpuss kind of goes away. My negativity kind of goes away. So, but I do think we have to learn to cultivate our silly side and our sense of humor. And if we can't laugh at ourselves, and our own silly processes and choices and decisions that we have made, and these beliefs that we have fabricated and created based on a circumstance that may or may not be true, but in that circumstance, maybe they were true. It's so hard to recognize that we're hanging on to things. And I think that when we hang on to things, they age us. They make us more dense, more heavy, more negative, more fearful. My mother, because she is in a memory care unit because she has dementia, it's interesting how her whole life she's had one of those shields on. And, now that she's got the dementia, she uses that shield as a weapon because she's never been able to resolve the conflict that she has inside that is fueling that shield. And so now that shield has become, like a weapon she's using and lashing out at people. And so I watch that and I say to myself, boy, I don't want to be that way. So I think I'd rather pay attention to what I'm doing and how it's affecting people and do my very best to take responsibility for it. And know that I'm going to fail. We're all human. We're all going to fail. But I just look at it and I go, I want to age gracefully, and I want to age from the place that I'm that happy older person that has great stories and is funny and silly and that everybody wants to be around, rather than the sourpuss that is negative and complaining and bitchy and always finding fault and making everybody feel bad when they're bending over backwards for them. So that's what I wanted to talk about today. And thank you for listening, about my little quote today. I would rather be silly than sour. Thanks, everyone.